Very good morning. Today we are going to discuss CS Executive Module 1, first subject. It belongs to JIGL, Jurisprudence, Interpretation and General Laws. Under this subject, we are going to discuss the first chapter, and the first chapter start with sources of law. So under this chapter, this is the first and foremost chapter. Like, we are going to see how the law has been derived. So first point deals with the according to the Jack Welch, what he has mentioned for the law. So he has mentioned that law is the command, means law is the direction of the sovereign. So the direction is provided by any highest authority. It is called sovereign. Law is the instrument to regulate. Why we are implementing the law is to regulate the human behavior, whether the human behavior it is regulated by social life or by business life. So we are going to regulate the laws of human being, and that belongs to the social life or human life. So this is the first definition provided by Jack Welch with respect to law. Now, the nature and the meaning of law has been described by various jurists. Accordingly, there are 5 schools of law. Under this 5 schools of law, there are various jurists have been involved, and the definition of law has been prescribed by various jurists under the different kind of school. But there is no consensus between them. However, there is no consensus of opinion regarding what is the true nature of the law and meaning of the law. The reason is because different jurists has different point of view with respect to implementation of law. Right? So according to the Jack Welch, so law is a command given by any sovereign which needs to control the human life, whether it's a social life or a professional life, right? Business life. So this is the definition provided by Jack Welch. Now, the meaning and the nature of law is depend on the jurist and defined by the various jurists, but there is no consensus because different jurists have different opinion with respect to law. So for the purpose of clarity and better understanding of nature and meaning of law, we may classify various definitions into 5 broad classes. Now this is going to be the important concept. First is, and you need to by heart these 5 school name. First is natural school of law. Second is positivistic school of law. Third is historical school of law. Fourth is sociological, and fifth is realistic, right? So to understand the law, we may classify into 5 school of law. First is natural school of law. Second is positivistic school of law. Third is historical, sociological and realistic, right? So these are the 5 school of law. In examination, they may ask a question that write down what are the 5 school of law, right? So in our ICSI module, what they have prescribed? They have provided us the concept of sources of law, right? So we have gone through the definition of Jack Welch, that law is the command of the sovereign. Law is the instrument which needs to control the human behavior, whether it is a social life or a business life, right? And this definition is provided by Jack Welch. Now, second concept deals with respect to law, like introduction of law. So we already checked out that there are 5 school of law. First is natural, second is positivistic, third is historical, fourth is sociological, and fifth is realistic, right? So there are 5 school of law at present. Now we are going to see through the charts that first is natural school of law, and this is going to be the important. This is the first school of law. Let's start. Natural law. So natural law is the moral theory. Natural law is the moral theory which maintains that law should be based on morality and ethics. So under the natural law, what the jurist has provided, that law is the natural law which depends on the morality and ethics. Means whatever you are making in the law, that should be present in the ethics. People are ready to follow by default. Certain rights that are inherent by virtue of human nature. Means, so under the natural school of law, jurist has provided like law is by default present in the nature of law, nature of the human being, that can be understood universally through human reason. Now, this is going to be important. Under this school, most of the ancient definition given by Roman and other ancient jurists. So first we are going to the ancient Hindu view, that law is the command of God. As per the ancient Hindu view, so what they have prescribed, that whatever law you are making, that is the command of the God. We will treat that that God will give a direction and not any political sovereign. So law is the command of God, right? God has provided some directions, and this is not as per the some political sovereign. Everybody, including the rules, is bound to obey. Everybody needs to follow the rules. Thus, law is a part of dharma. So they have linked the law with the part of dharma. The idea of justice is always present in Hindu concept of law. So as a Hindu, we are going to, in our ancient Hindu view, so this is particularly mentioned that law is a part of dharma, and we are going to bound, we need to obey the directions of the law. Now, second most definition is provided by the Salmond. What he has mentioned? The prominent modern law, natural law thinker define law as the body of principle recognized and applied by the state in the administration of justice. So what they have mentioned, the two main factors involved in this definition of Salmond. First is that to understand law, one should know its purpose. Whatever law has been implemented, you should understand the purpose behind its implementation, right? So this is going to be the important point, that whatever law is government is implementing or anybody is implementing, that you need to understand the purpose behind the introduction of this law. This is the first point. Second, in order to ascertain the true nature of law, one should go to the court and not to the legislature. If you want to, the interpretation of law applies to the court, not to the legislature. Legislature is the authority who creates the law, who makes the law. So for interpretation, you need to go, it is a duty cast on the court. Court is the right authority who are going to interpret the law. And for the purpose of interpretation, you are not supposed to go to the legislature. You need to approach to the court. So we have seen the two definitions. First is ancient Hindu view. Second is Salmond definition. Third is Vingredov described law as a set of rule imposed. A set of rule imposed and enforced by society with regard to attribution and exercise of power over, right? So this is the definition provided by the Vingredov, right? So in case of natural school of law, so this is our study material. Natural school of law, there are various definitions provided. So the most important definition is provided by the Salmond, ancient Hindu view, and Vingredov. Exercise of power over person and things, right? So this is the important point. This is the three definitions is prescribed in natural school of law. Now, so there are 5 school of law. First is natural school of law. Now, second is positivistic definition of law, and this starts with, it says that there must be some superior governmental entity that is not subject to any question or challenge. So for the purpose of implementation of law under the positivistic definition of law, they have prescribed there should be some superior governmental entity that is not subject to any question or challenge. Means nobody has a power to challenge that entity. This entity is responsible for determining what is right. So this governmental agency is responsible for determining that what is right and what is wrong as a matter of law. So according to the jurist, according to the John Austin, you need to remember that name, right? So under the positivistic school of law, there are two type of jurists involved. First is John Austin and second is Hans Kelsen. So first one is John Austin. John Austin, it's 1719 to 1859, was a legal expert who greatly shaped legal system all over the world through his analytical approach to jurisprudence and theory of legal positivism, right? So John Austin is the person who provided a legal shape, who provided a legal validity to the concept of analytical approach to jurisprudence, and he introduced the theory of positivism. In furtherance of his legal positivism theory was his notion, law as a command, law as a direction. Owing to his work, he has been treated as a father of English jurisprudence. Maybe in the examination, the examiner will ask a question, write a short note on the fathers of English jurisprudence. So for this, you need to recall the concept of as provided by the John Austin. Law is the aggregate of rules set by man as political superior or sovereign to man as a political subject. Means some higher authority should be there for the purpose of implementation of the law. Law is the command of the sovereign. It obliges a certain course of conduct. You need to do some act or imposes a duty and is backed by the sanction. Now this is the important point. So under the John Austin, he has provided three important terms. First is command, second is duty, and third is sanction. Like these are the three important terms, these are the three important words has been provided by John Austin. So he has provided, whenever you are drafting any law, you need to comprise these three words. First is command, second is duty, and third is sanction, right? So this is the concept of John Austin as provided for the law. Second jurist is Carl Kelsen, gives a pure theory of law. Pure theory of law means he has clearly specified whatever law you are making, that should be pure, that should be not based on, it should be free from ethics. There is no room for ethics, morality, politics, history, etc. It must be pure. Whatever law you are making, it should be pure, it should be free from ethics, morality, politics, history, etc. etc. It should be pure in its shape. Hans Kelsen was an Austrian jurist. He was born at Prague in Austria in 1881. Was a professor of law at the Vienna University. She was also the judge of the Supreme Constitutional Court of Austria for 10 years. That is he. During 1920-1930, he released the theory of law entitled The General Theory of Law and State in 1945. It draws the attention of modern jurisprudence and came to be known as a Kelsen pure theory of law. Whenever in examination they have asked a question, write a short note on the pure theory of law. So whenever there is a word of Kelsen, right? You need to remember that concept of law. Law is a normative science. What is law? Is a normative science. Law does not attempt to describe what actually occurs, but only prescribes certain rules. So what has prescribed by the Kelsen? That you are not supposed to predict the future. Just you need to fix your rules, and whatever will be happen, that should be set by the rules, right? So what he has prescribed? That law does not attempt to describe what actually occurs, but it should prescribe only certain rules. Accordingly, we will discuss in the concept of that what will happen, that should be decided as per the set rules, set parameters, right? So this is the second school of law, that is called positivistic definition of law. Right. So in study material part, so this is the concept of natural law, and this is the concept of positivistic definition of law as provided by John Austin, as provided by the Kelsen, right? So you can mention the content whatever is provided in the charts, and this is the overall content, right? Now third is historical definition of law. Savigny theory of law. Savigny, a German jurist, he is a German jurist, is regarded as the founder of historical school on the continent, that is in Europe, in 19th century, right? Savigny is he is described as a founder of historical school. You can link the pure law with the Kelsen. Austin provides for certain that it is a command, it is a duty, it is a sanction, and Savigny provided he is the founder of historical school of jurisprudence in the year 19th century, known as a pioneer of the historical school of law through his concept, and he introduced a new concept, and that new concept is Volksgest. It means spirit of law. It means common perception of the people, what actually the common people want, that should be involved in the law, right? The term, and that term is derived from the two words, that is, first is Volk, which means people, second is gest, which means their common will, right? So that term is introduced by the historical school of law, that is called Savigny, defined this concept. He introduced this word, and that word involves common will of the people, common will of the intention. Theory of Savigny can be explained as follows. So he has introduced five concepts. First, that law is a matter of unconscious and organic growth, means law is found and it is not made. So he clearly mentioned that whatever law you are going to implement, it should be found, it should not be made. First point. Law is not universal, means same principle will not apply over the other continent or over the other situation. So this is not universally applicable. It may differ from subject to subject in its nature. Like language, it varies from people and age. Same as the language will be changed according to the region by region. So law will also change as per the region. So first point is organic growth. Second point, law is not universal, right? So this will be changes according to the region by region. Third point, custom not only precedes legislation but it's superior to it. Now this is the important point. Savigny has provided an emphasis on that whatever law you are introducing, there will be a custom. Custom means the riti rivaj, what you are following, the ancient views they are following, that should be always be superior to the law. So again we are going to read, customs not only precedes legislation but it is superior to it. Custom are always superior to law. Law should always conform to the popular consensus. Fourth point, law has its source in the common consent, matlab means will of the people, common will of the people. Whatever law you are preparing, that should present the will of the people, common will of the people. Legislation is the last stage of lawmaking, and therefore the lawyer or the jurist is more important than the legislature. What he has mentioned, that legislation is the last step. So who is superior, the lawyer or the jurist is more important than the legislature, means the person who is making this law. So this is the concept as provided under historical definition of law by Savigi. He is clearly provided whatever you are involved in the law, that should reflect the common intention of the people. Now in module part, so they have provided this definition of, right. Next is sociological definition of law. Sociological definition of law. Hering social interest theory. Rudolf von Hering was educated at Berlin in Germany. He was a professor at Basel. He laid down the foundation of modern sociological jurisprudence, right? He laid down the principle of modern sociological jurisprudence. Hering defined law as the form of the guarantee of the condition of life of society assured by state power of constraint. So he provided that there should be a preference to society. Whatever law you are providing, whatever law you are making, that law should provide comfort to the society. There are three essential of this definition. First, law is treated as only means of social. Law is to serve the social purpose. Whatever law you are implementing, that should not be harsh. It should fulfill the social purpose. It is coercive in character. Now, there is a jurist called Nathan Roscoe Pound. Was an American legal scholar and educator. According to the Pound, law is a social engineering, which means, now he introduced the concept of social engineering. So in every school of law, every jurist has involved some special term, and you need to remember that term. You need to use that term with respect to your examination part. A balance between the competing interest in society, in which applied science are used for resolving individual and social problem. So he has provided that whatever law you will make, that should be used for the purpose of resolving the individual and social problem. Roscoe Pound think of law as a social institution to satisfy social want. So he introduced the concept of sociology. He introduced the concept of social engineering, and he wanted whatever law you are enforceable, it should satisfy the social wants. The claim and demand and expectation involved in the existence of civilized society by giving effect to as much as may be satisfied. Such claim giving effect by ordering of human conduct through political organized society. For facilitating the task of social engineering, Pound classified various interests to be protected by law in three heads. First is private interest or individual interest. Second is public interest, and third is social interest, right? So you can see PPS, right? So Roscoe Pound has divided all the interest into three parts. First is individual interest, second is public interest, and third is social interest. Under the private interest or individual interest, he introduced the concept of personality, domestic relation, interest of substance like ownership of any property, freedom of association, continuity of employment, that will fall under the individual interest. Second, public interest, interest of a state as a jurist person, that is protection. Interest of a state as a guardian of social interest, and under this social interest, in general security, in the security of social institution, general morals and conservation of social resources, right? So whatever interest is involved, Roscoe Pound has divided into three parts. First is individual interest, public interest, and social interest, right? So he propounded the law of social engineering. He founded the law of social engineering, and he wanted that whatever law you are imposing, whatever law you will make, that should fulfill the social needs, that should solve the problem of individual problem and social problem also, right? So this is the fourth school of law, that is called sociology definition of law. So in module there are two jurists, Eyring and Roscoe-Pont, right? So they have provided a concept. And last is realistic definition of law. Realistic definition of law. Realistic definition in terms of judicial process. This is the fifth school of law. According to the Hobbes, law is a statement of circumstances in which public force will be brought to bear such through courts. And according to the Cardozo, a principle or a rule of conduct so established as to justify a prediction. With reasonable certainty, you need to be certainly that it will be enforced by the court. It is the authority is challenged, is principle or rule of law. To summarize, if we summarize the whole concept of school of law, following are the main features of law, and a definition to become universal one must incorporate all these elements. Means, so this is the conclusion of all the school of law, that whatever law you are making, that law should contain minimum these type of qualities. First, law presupposes a state. Second, the state makes or authorized to make or recognize or sanction rules which are called law. State needs to properly implement the law. For the rules to be effective, there are sanctions behind them. If you want to that law should be effective, you need to provide some kind of sanction behind them. These rules called laws are made to serve some purpose. You are not going to implement the law for any random thought. It should fulfill some purpose. The purpose may be social purpose as per the sociology school of law, or it may be simply to serve some common ends of despot. This is the important concept, right, as involved in the school of law. So these are the important concepts as defined in the school of law. So this is the whole concept of school of law, right? As per the module concept, realistic definition of law has been prescribed by this concept. Now, so this is to summarize this, you need to present whatever law has been prescribed, that law should contain minimum bare, these are the requirement. So there are 5 school of law. This is the first most important concept as far as examination is concerned with respect to sources law. So the first question the examiner can ask, they may ask the question of what, write down the school of nature of law. Now what are the schools of law? So you need to mention there are 5 school of law, right? So you can mention that there are 5 school of law. First is natural school of law. Second is positivistic school of law. Third is historical school of law. Fourth is sociological school of law, and fifth is realistic school of law. Or examiner can ask a simple 3 marks question on any specific school of law for which we have provided enough content so that you can mention in the examination part, right? So this is the first important concept with respect to school of law, right? Now next concept starts with how the law will be effective, how the laws are made to be effective. So the 4 points have been prescribed by another source of law. First, by requiring damages to be paid for an injury due to disobedience. It means whatever law you are going to implement, you should provide some kind of punishment under this law, that if a person disobey any law, or if he fails to fulfill any law, if he contravenes any law, there should be damages paid to the plaintiff part. This is the first point. Second, by requiring one in some instances to complete an obligation he has failed to perform, like in case of breach of contract. So as per the Indian Contract Act 1872, there is a remedy for breach of contract. So you need to provide, there is a specific relief act 1963. So under this you need to perform that contract for which you have entered. So this is a specific performance of a contract. Third point, by preventing disobedience. And fourth point, by administering some form of punishment. There is a concept of punishment, there is a concept of imprisonment, there is a concept of penalty part. So these are the four methods through which we are going to make the law effective one, right? So first one is provide for any damages. Second one is perform the obligation. Third one is to prevent the disobedience, and fourth one is by administering some form of punishment. Through incorporating these four aspects, your laws will be effective, right? People will be ready to follow and they bound to obey the directions as prescribed under the law, right? So laws are made to be effective. So there are 4 points you need to remember, these 4 steps, these 4 points with respect to effectiveness. Now, with respect to significance of law, law is not static, it is not silent. As circumstances and conditions in society changes, law has to be changed, right? This is the important point. Law should not be static, it should not be fixed, it should not be rigid, it should be flexible. Means whenever there is a condition of society changes, when some rules are changes in the society, like for example nowadays, as far as physical contracts are involved, there is a maximum nowadays there is a e-contract, a contract over internet are involved. So law should accordingly be changed, that it should also include, in case of breach of contract, in case of electronic contract, e-contract, that there should be a same punishment as applied to physical contract will be applied to the e-contract also. So whenever there is a change in the society, law should be amended, it should be flexible. At any given point of time, thus prevailing law of society must be in conformity with the general statement, customs, aspirations of its people. It should fulfill all this purpose. Like for example, as per the Indian Contract Act 1872, that law was effective in 1872, but nowadays in 2020 that law is also effective because it amended certain times, it involves many terms, and the contract is also effective till date in case of e-commerce transactions. The object of law is to form and the object of law is to form an opinion which in turn provides hope of security for the future. Law is expected to provide socio-economic justice and remove the existing imbalances in the said structure, to play a specific role in the task of achieving various socio-economic goals mentioned in our constitution. So whatever mentioned is constitution, that should be followed, right? It is to serve as a vehicle of social change, as a harbinger of the social justice. It should provide a social change, it should provide a social justice, right? So this is the importance of law. This is the significance of law, right? So this is the especially this point is more important as far as examination part is concerned, right? So under your module, law is not static. You need to remember that para, and you need to remember the third para. The object of law is to form an order which in turn provide hope for the society for the future. Like suppose for example, if any person has conducted some act which is not acceptable in society, then it is the duty of the court that they need to provide strict punishment, so that will set a standard, set up a directions for the future conduct of any person for this kind of offenses. Now the concept, this is the these are the two topics: how the laws are made effective and what is the significance of law. Next is sources of Indian law. Now we are presiding, now we are focusing on Indian part, that how the laws, what are the sources of Indian law. This expression sources of law have been used to convey different meaning. Austin contended law originate from the sovereign. Savigny traces the origin in Volkgist, means general will of the people. The socialists find law in numerous heterogeneous factors. For theologians, law originates from God. Vedas and the Qurans, which are primarily sources of Hindus and Mohammedan law, respectively, are considered to be revealed by the God. Precisely, whatever source of origin may be attributed to law, it must be emanated from almost similar source in most of the societies. So there are different sources of law as per the different person's opinion. But the modern Indian law administered in courts is derived from various sources, and all these sources fall into two categories. First is primary source of law, and second is secondary source of law. Under this primary source of law, we need to discuss the four concepts, that is called customs and customary law. Important one. A we can mention as A. B is judicial decision and precedent. Custom means what are the ancient views, ritual rivas for the existing problem, that should be decided by the custom. Judicial view and precedents means court decision, high court, supreme court, what are their views. Statutes and legislations or personal law, Hindu law, Muslim law, Mohammedan law. Secondary source of law, secondary source of Indian law depends on justice, equity and good conscience. Source of English law, common law, law merchant, principle of equity and statute law. So these are the concept of English modern Indian law, right? So there are the two sources. First is principal, second is secondary. Under the principal and most important part is principal source of law. As far as examination is concerned, the main provisions are concerned in this principal source of law only, right? So there are two types of sources of law, and we are going to see the principal source of law, and most important part is custom or customary law, right? So first principal source is customs or customary law. Means the law are based on the custom. Law should be implemented, law should be made on the basis of customs only, because customs are always superior as per the legislator, right? Custom is the most ancient of all sources of law. The custom word, the word custom, now this is going to be the interesting, right? Now what is custom, right? So there are different type of persons have described that there is a origin of the custom word is already disputed, right? For example, the word custom is derived from the old French word costume. Some says it is based on the Latin word costudio. Others says there is a different word so-called costiceri, which means a custom. In Hindi, the word custom means riti, rasm, riwaj, or Urdu we can say, right? So these are the different origin of custom word from different type of part. Now, important definition. Jurists have already provided definition of custom. So we have mentioned the certain important definition according to the Salmon, according to Austin, according to Holland, right? So first is provided by the Salmon. According to him, custom is the embodiment of those principles which have commanded themselves to the national conscience as principle of justice and public utility. So what they have mentioned, that you need to follow the custom, and custom is the main which we need to follow. This is the main commanded principle on which basis you need to prepare the law. Second is provided by Austin. According to Austin, custom is a rule of conduct which the governed observe spontaneously, means instantly, and not in pursuance of law set by any political superior, right? So you need to follow the custom. He defined custom as a generally observed course of conduct. And by will people are ready to follow. If there is a custom, if there is some ancient view, if there is some ancient rule established by the predecessor, then in this case we are following by will, not by any sovereign or law. Now, classification of customs. So customs are classified into two parts. The custom may be divided into two classes. First is custom without sanction, and second is custom having sanction. Sanction means some authority. So custom without sanction means without authority. Custom without sanction are those customs which are non-obligatory and are observed due to the pressure of public opinion, right? We need to follow as per the society. These are called as a positive morality because we are not obliged to follow, because we are due to any pressure, due to any outside pressure, like we are following by will, by our will. So this is called as positive morality, while custom having sanction is known as a negative morality, right? Now, customs having sanction are those customs which are enforced by the state by any law. It is within these customs that we are concerned here right now. So there are two types of custom. First is legal customs. Legal custom, these customs operate as a binding rule of law, means you need to fulfill the legally. They have been recognized and enforced by the court. Therefore, they have become a part of the law of land. Now, legal custom is again divided into two parts. Local custom, general custom. What is local custom? Local custom is the custom which prevails, which goes with the person to person, which prevails in some definite locality and constitutes a source of law for that place only. So local custom will apply for that place only, for a specific area only. Thus, local custom may be divided into two classes: geographical local custom or personal local custom. Maybe it is based on the geography, it is based on the place only, so that will fall specifically under geographical local custom. Or if it involves with the person, so that will fall under the personal local custom. General custom. A general custom is that which prevails throughout the country and constitutes one of the source of law of land. Conventional customs. Now that that customs having sanction is divided into two parts. First is legal custom. Legal custom into two parts: local custom, general custom. Local custom into two parts: geographical local, personal local. Now second part is conventional custom. These are depend on the usage. These customs are binding due to an agreement between the parties and not due to any legal authority independently possessed by them. Before a court treats the conventional custom as incorporated in a contract, following condition must be satisfied. First point, it must be shown that convention is clearly established. For implementing this, you need to provide the reason, you need to provide the logic, and it is fully known to the contracting parties. There is no fixed period for which a conventional must have been observed before it is recognized as binding. Conventional cannot alter the general law of the land. It must be reasonable, right? So conventional custom is, first you need to mention, you need to clearly satisfy, established. Second, conventional cannot alter and it will not alter the general law of land. Like whatever law is specifically prevailing, you are not going to alter that law of land. It must be reasonable, right? So this is the important concept. Examiner can ask a simple question on this concept. It can ask a 5 marks question. Right? What are the classification of custom? So accordingly you need to mention this whole concept, right? Now, so there is sources of law. Austin is provided. There are two sources of law. First is principal source, second is secondary source. Under the principal source, there are four types of dependence. First is custom, second is judicial or precedents, statute legislation, personal law. Under this custom, so this is provided in this custom part, right? Classification, custom without sanction, we already gone through, custom having sanction, legal custom, local custom, general custom, right? Conventional custom. So these are the important concept as provided in this topic. Now there are certain prerequisites, there are requisition of a valid customs, right? First, it must be immemorial. Antiquity. A custom to be valid must be proved to be immoral. It must be ancient, means it should be old as much as possible. Nobody is able to derive the origin of that custom. This is the important point. According to the Blackstone, a custom, in order that it may be legal and binding, must have been used so long that the memory of man runs not to the contrary, means there should not be any dispute with respect to its origin, so that if anyone can show the beginning of it, it is no good custom, right? Nobody should prove the origin of that custom, then only it will be treated as a custom. Second, certainty. The custom must be certain, definite, and must not be vague or ambiguous. Reasonableness means nowadays you can also follow, after 20 years you can also follow. This should be reasonable. A custom must be reasonable. It must be useful and convenient to the society. A custom is unreasonable if it is opposed to the principle. Compulsory observance. A custom to be valid must have been continuously observed without any interruption from the times immemorial. It must be regarded by those affected by it as an obligatory or binding rule of conduct. Conformity with the law and public morality. A custom must not be opposed to morality and public policy, nor must it conflict with the statute law. If a custom is expressly forbidden by legislation or abrogated by statute, it is not applicable. Then it is not applicable. Unanimity of opinion. The custom must be generally and universal. It should be universally applicable. If practice is left to individual choice, it cannot be termed as a custom. If the custom belongs to any individual choice, then it will not be a custom. It should be universal applicability. Consistency. There must be a consistency among the custom. Custom must not come in conflict with the other established customs. Peaceable enjoyment. The custom must have been enjoyed peaceably without any dispute in any law court or otherwise, right? So these are the point. First is immemorial, so we can take I. Second is C. Third is R. Then C. Conformity with the law, unanimity of opinion, consistency, and P, right? So these are the point. So there are overall there are 8 points as prescribed under this concept, which is respect to requisites of a valid custom, right? If we want to make a mnemonic code, so we can take 1C, 2C, 3C, 4C. So there are C4, and there is a U, so called anonymity, and P, so this is called cup, okay? And there is so the code is now the mnemonic code in front of you is Capri, right? Capri is the requisite of a customs. C stands for, first C stands for certainty, second C stands for compulsory observance, third C stands for conformity with the law and public morality, and fourth is consistency. U stands for anonymity, P stands for peaceful enjoyment. So this is cup. R stands for reasonableness and I stands for immemorial. Right? So these are the requisites of a valid customs, right? And this is going to be the important concept also. After this custom part, there is a second principal source of law. There is a second concept called judicial decisions or precedents, right? And this is going to be the first chart for this concept. What are precedents? So precedents means whatever has been prescribed by the judge in their decision, the rule, the decision of the court, that is called precedent. In general use, the term precedent means some set pattern guiding the future conduct. Like for example, in a famous landmark case law, judge has provided certain parameters. That parameter will be treated as a precedence. In judicial field, it means the guidance or authority of past decision of the court for future cases. So if there is any say for example, there is a famous case law called Solomon versus Solomon, right? We refer nowadays also for a concept of separate legal entity, right? So this is the concept, this is the landmark case, this is the past decision for the future cases. So this is precedent, right? As far as this judicial field is concerned. The principle of law expressed for the first time in the court decision become precedent. Like whenever at that previous time the decision of Solomon versus Solomon is prescribed, that set as a precedent. The principle of law expressed for the first time in the court decision becomes the precedent to be followed in the law problem cases identical with them in future, so that we can just use that past law decision of any court for the future cases belongs to identical matters only. The rule that a court decisions becomes a precedent to be followed in similar cases is known as a doctrine of stare decisis, right? And this rule is known as a stress decisis, means you're not eligible to unsettle the things which are already settled. Means in Solomon versus Solomon, there is a concept of separate legal entity is well established, is well defined by the House of Lords. So you're not going to put any kind of argument with respect to that similar cases. So you are not going to unsettle the things which are already settled. That doctrine is called doctrine of stare decisis, right? Now there is a High Court, there is a Supreme Court, right? First we are going towards the Supreme Court part. Supreme Court is the highest court in India. The expression all courts used in 141 refers to all courts except the Supreme Court, only to courts other than Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is not bound by its own decision, means if any matter is involved in front of Supreme Court and Supreme Court has provided some decision, after 1 year same matter will appear with the different parties, again the Supreme Court can provide a different view. However, in practice, generally, the Supreme Court has observed that earlier decision of the court cannot be departed from unless there are extraordinary and special reason to do so. If there is a special reason, then only there will be a departure between the two decisions of the Supreme Court. Otherwise, they will also not do this. If the earlier decision is found to be erroneous or is thus detrimental means adverse effect to the general welfare of the public, the Supreme Court will not hesitate in departing from it. So the Supreme Court will depart from its own decision as provided in the past with respect to future decision with the same point of view with the different party, only when there is some detrimental interest over the public, means there is some adverse effect on the public. Now, High Court. The decision, this is going to be the important. The decision of High Court are binding on all the subordinate court, district court, family court, whatever courts are belongs to subordinate to the High Court. That decision of the High Court should be followed. And tribunal within its jurisdiction. In case of any conflict between the two decisions of co-equal benches, generally the later decision is to be followed. In High Court, a single judge constitutes a smallest bench. This will be lowest bench, single judge. So this is the smallest bench. Above this, a bench of two judges is known as a division bench. A bench of two judges is known as the division bench, DB. Three or more judges is known as the full bench. That is called full bench, FB. We can say as a FB, right? So whatever decision is provided by the full bench, it should be binding on both. Whatever decision is provided by division bench should be followed by the single bench judge, smaller bench. One bench of the same High Court cannot take a view contrary to the decision already given by the another coordinate bench of that High Court. You are not eligible. Though decision of a division bench is wrong, it is binding on the single. Though decision of this division bench is wrong, then too it should be followed by a smaller bench, right? Because this is subordinate court and this is highest court. Thus, a decision by a bench of High Court should be followed by other benches unless there is a reason to defer it. There should be some rationale behind it, in which case the proper course is to refer the question for decision by the full bench. The High Court are the court of coordinate jurisdictions. Therefore, the decision of one High Court is not binding on the High Court of other jurisdictions, right? Now, it means that if any decision is provided by MP High Court that will not be followed by the UP High Court, they can provide a different decision. But it is not binding, it is only persuasive value, means they can consider whatever points have been decided by the MP High Court, but they are not supposed to follow each and every point as provided by MP High Court in their decision of UP High Court. They have their persuasive value, means they will only consider the points. For the sake of opinion, right? The Supreme Court is the highest authority and its decisions are binding all the courts at the judicial tribunal of the country. Article 141 of the Constitution makes it clear that the law declared by the Supreme Court binding on all courts within the territory of India, right? So law has clearly provided that whatever law is provided, it should be whatever law is decided by the Supreme Court, that should be bind by the all courts in India, right? Now, there are kinds of precedents. Precedents, first is declaratory and original precedents. What is declaratory? Declaratory precedents means which declares only what already has been decided, and original precedents means this is considered as a first time, right? According to the Salmon, a declaratory precedent is one which is merely the application of already existing rule of law. You just need to copy and paste. While an original precedent is one which creates or applies a new rule of law. You need to comply the new rule of law. That is called original precedent, right? In the case of declaratory precedent, the rule is applied because it is already established in law. In the case of, so we can take as a original decree and revisionary decree kind of thing. In case of original precedent, it is the law for the future because it is now applied. In case of advanced countries, declaratory precedent are more numerous. The number of original precedent is small because already there are nowadays there are 100, there are 1,000, there are lakhs of cases already decided. And whatever new case will arise, it depend upon the almost same situations which may be arising in the past. So that new cases arise on the basis of the past will be treated as a declaratory precedents. So nowadays original precedents are very small and they will involve in the new law. Whenever there is a new law introduced, the case will enter to the court, then there should be some set of decisions provided by the judge, and that will be treated as a original precedent. They alone develop the law of the country. They serve as a good evidence of law for the future. A declarative precedent is a good as a source of law. Original precedent, the legal authority, both is exactly the same. So this is the first precedent, that is called original and declarative precedent. Second is persuasive precedent. Persuasive means that it is not binding on the judge to comply each and everything as provided by the earlier judge. They will only consider certain points for their wishes, that they can take a reference kind of thing, right? A persuasive precedent is one which the judge are not obliged to follow. You are not supposed to follow, but which they will take into consideration and to which they will attach great weight as it seems to have to deserve, right? So they will consider only the opinion part. A persuasive precedent therefore is not a legal source of law. This is not a legal source of law, but is regarded as a historical source of law. Thus in India, the decision of one high court are only persuasive precedent. In the other high court having the same jurisdiction, MP High Court, UP High Court, they have a persuasive value of their respective decisions. The ruling of English and American courts are persuasive precedent only. Obiter dicta can have only persuasive value. Now, what is a obiter dicta? Like while deciding any case, judge has provided some extra comments with respect to that case. This will treat it as a obiter dicta. Absolutely authoritative precedent. An authoritative precedent is one which a judge must follow whether they approve of it or not. Means they should be compulsory follow. It's a binding force, is absolute. Absolute means 100% you need to comply. The judge's discretion is altogether excluded. You are not supposed to apply your mind. You just need to follow whatever is mentioned. That is called absolute authoritative precedent. Such a decision has a legal claim to implicit obedience, even if the judge considers it wrong. Judge is considering it is wrong, then too you need to comply. Unlike a persuasive precedent, which is mere historical, an authoritative precedent is a legal source of law. That's why you need to comply. That's suppose, for example, if any decision is provided by Supreme Court, then High Court need to comply with decision by word to spirit of law. Absolute authoritative precedent in India. Every court in India is absolute bound by the decisions of courts superior to itself. Like district court is obliged to follow the decision of the Supreme Court and High Court. High Court is obliged to follow each and every word of the decided by the Supreme Court. The subordinate courts are bound to follow the decisions of the High Court to which they are subordinate. Means UP High Court, Allahabad High Court, there is a Allahabad High Court in Uttar Pradesh. So whatever court are situated in UP, district court, family court, small benches court, they need to comply with the UP High Court decision. A single bench of High Court is bound by the decision of two or more judges, that is called division bench or full bench. All courts are absolutely bound by the decisions of Supreme Court. In England, decision of a House of Lords are absolutely binding, not only the inferior court but also even itself. Likewise, the decision of the Court of Appeal are absolutely bound upon itself. Now, last is conditional authoritative precedent. A conditional authoritative precedent is one which, through ordinarily binding on the court before which it is cited, is liable to be disregarded in certain circumstances. Means you are eligible that you can disregard. The court is entitled to disregard a decision if it is a wrong one, that is contrary to law and reason. Suppose, for example, if any High Court judge has provided any decision and he exceeded his jurisdiction, in that case, district court judge has a power that he need to mention that fact and he can disregard the decision. In India, for instance, the decision of a single judge of a High Court is absolutely authoritative so far as subordinate judiciary is concerned, but it is only conditional authoritative when cited before a division bench of the same high court, right? So these are the four kind of precedent which we have gone through. The first one is important, is declaratory and original precedent. Second is persuasive. Third is absolute authoritative precedent, AAP. And fourth is conditional authoritative precedent, right? So these are the four kind of precedent. Examiner can ask a single simple question on kind of precedent, so you need to mention the all the 4 points, or they can ask any specific one also, right? So after this custom part, there is a concept of valid customs. Okay, high court, there is a concept of supreme court, we already gone through this. There's a kind of precedent, so there are 4 kind of precedent. These are the important concept, right? As far as concept is concerned, right? Kinds of precedents.